Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Mavens of Data. Really excited today. We're going to be talking about financial modeling, kind of an adjacent topic to data analysis. So if you've ever thought about potentially adding financial modeling skills, forecasting type skills to your repertoire, this is the show for you. Really excited. We've got one of my favorite people in data, Giles Male, here today. These are kind of some of the main questions we're going to be getting into. It's meant to be a pretty free-flowing conversation. We'll try to keep an eye on what folks in the chat are interested in too. But you can definitely expect to see these things among others. So yeah, with that, maybe let's get into the bulk of it, Giles. I guess let's start kind of ground the conversation for people that don't necessarily know what does a financial modeler do. Let's start there. That's probably a great way to set the table.
Yeah, and I think you probably thought that would be like the nice easy intro question, and what I've done is I've come up with the most elaborately overly long answer to that question. But I talk about this in the course that I've done for Maven, but I think it's really important. So I'm gonna categorize four things. All right. The first category is the career financial modeler, because when you say what does a financial modeler do, it depends. So if you've got like a career financial modeler, and you might find these rare beasts in financial modeling houses, like companies that what they do is financial modeling, Operis, Gridlines, F1, F9, Numeritas, and they look at their jobs look a certain way. I think you've then got to distinguish like people that have a finance role, but part of their responsibility is doing financial modeling of some sort. And I think that's very, very different. And then you've got the verb, financial modeling. What does it mean to be financial modeling? Like, what are you actually doing when you are financial modeling? And then there's the thing you build, which is the financial model. So I can go into varying degrees of detail. I don't want to bore people too much, but I would certainly, for those first two categories, I would distinguish it. Like if you are a career financial modeler, basically everything you do for your job is about producing these financial models, which are typically forecasts of, future business performance. If you are somebody in finance that has a part of your responsibility as a financial modeler of some sort, then yeah, you'll still be leaning on those kind of modeling skills, but you've probably got an accounting degree, or you've been working to treasury certifications, and you've got all this other theory and knowledge that is kind of part of the puzzle alongside your modeling skills. So there you go. That was probably a much longer answer than you expected.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it sounds like it's all about how much of financial modeling is the role, how deep you're going to go. But it could be really useful skills for, somebody who wants to go all in on financial modeling, or just anybody in finance, or even like a startup guy like myself, to be able to do some basic forecasting for our business. Like there's some really useful skills here. I want to quickly hear from the audience again. How many of you are already in financial modeling or in finance, or are potentially interested in maybe exploring a career there? That would be really good to see.
Carolina is. I know she is. Hi, Carolina. She's a good modeler. There's probably a few people that are experienced modelers in this chat, so it'd be good to hear from you as well.
Awesome. Yeah, some FP&A folks at a bank as a data analyst. So that's definitely financial data. A lot of people who are interested. So perfect. Yeah, this is great. Yeah. So Giles, let's say for some of these people that are interested in financial modeling, maybe they're not in the career path yet, what are some of the keys to success? Like, what makes somebody good at financial modeling?
A few things. So the easy answer, if you think of it now, is probably technical modeling skills. So I still think that's Excel. Like it's actually really interesting. You mentioned startups and things like that, or businesses doing their own modeling. I had a stat recently that 65% of startups use Google Sheets, probably because it's free versus like a 365 license. But I find Google Sheets really frustrating, to be honest. So there's an element of financial modeling, which is you can probably assume for the most part, people are talking about Excel skills. So as you know, as data analysts, like fundamental Excel skills is going to get you a huge way along that path. I think just having a general desire to do problem solving work is really important. If you're good at problem solving, that's great. If you then get a little bit specific and you're talking about things like three statement modeling, like a lot of groups of financial modelers will just assume, if you say, oh, I'm a financial modeler, they'll assume you are talking about building three statement models, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow.
Yep.
And sitting behind that, if you don't understand some basic accounting concepts, like the difference between revenue and cash or profit and cash, the different accounting principles that the three statements lean on, then you're going to struggle. So it's probably a mixture of those things. I would probably also add, which lots of people add in different ways, like the softer skills. And these terms get used a lot now, but I do think it's important not to just be a spreadsheet geek. Like if in today's world, if the only thing you do is wait to be told what to build, and then you're very good at building it, I think your career path is probably quite limited. But I'm going to guess that's the same for data analytics roles.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's come up anytime you and I have a conversation and we talk about like what are some successful people doing, what do they look like? There's a ton of overlap, like you say, like problem solving, communication skills, and then even just like being able to work with Excel is so important for a data analyst role. So it almost a lot of times feels like it's applying a lot of the same skills to kind of slightly different problems that aren't even really that complicated, more different. Like you guys in the financial modeling world probably have to have a better understanding of finance, and like the business acumen is like non-negotiable there. Whereas I think it's still really important for data analysis, like my type of role, but you might be able to get away with a little bit less. Like certainly you might be able to get away with not even knowing how to do three statement accounting, at all. But maybe having some business acumen is still pretty important. So
it's something I've talked about a few times, actually. When you look at like the difference between what I now just broadly say like is a data analyst and a financial modeler, and I know that's far too broad to cover everything, but one of the biggest difference for me between a data analyst's brain and a financial modeler's brain is purely like the structure of how they work with data, because financial modelers are typically in the grid of Excel, profiling time this way, and that's like the anti-data mindset, where it's like normalize the data, deep, narrow and deep, and fact table structured. And for financial modelers, it's alien to them until you start stepping into that data mindset, which is completely different.
Yep. How I'm curious, like I know one of the things originally we got to know each other, like you guys were interested in Power BI. Your folks at Full Stack were learning Power BI, and that's kind of an interesting theme. Like financial modelers and people in finance or FP&A in general being required to use more of these data tools. Is that still a trend that you're seeing, like that still being really important?
Yes and no. I think it's probably a bit broader. I think there was a period a few years ago where Power BI suddenly became this thing where everyone was like, oh my God, we've got to use Power BI. And I think I may have mentioned it when we talked before. We used to have some really interesting conversations where you'd get an inquiry from a finance team or a lead, and it'd be like, oh, we need to learn Power BI. Oh, why? Oh, because somebody saw it that's more senior than me and said we should use it because it looks cool. And it's like, okay, that's a terrible reason to step away from Excel into Power BI. And I'm only coming to grips with all of this myself now, or in the last year or two, where it's like the answers to that are probably more around, enterprise level data, role level security, the flexibility of Power BI to kind of filter reports without having to duplicate data everywhere. So I kind of get those answers myself far better. The buzzwords now are around things like Copilot and Fabric, which I kind of get. So we still see it. And I still think that if you can have a really good kind of fundamental level of knowledge in both camps, you're probably either going to be predominantly a data analyst or a financial modeler. But if you can strengthen the other camp to a point where you can hold really good conversations, I think that puts you in a really strong position.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's funny you say like how Power BI was kind of the shiny thing for a while, and now it's Copilot. And it's the same thing now. It's like people are they're being told, oh, you got to be using AI. You say, well, why? What problem am I trying to solve with this? Well, like, oh, I don't know. You just got to be using it, which is
and it's so funny when you see that and then you dig in and it's like, okay, but let's look at what you're doing with Excel. It's like, all we use is VLOOKUP. It's like, okay, so
yeah.
My argument would always be if your team can't use Excel really well, if they don't know how to build a really nice, well-structured best practice model in Excel, what the hell makes you think they're going to do any better with AI and Python and DAX? Like it's going to be even more chaotic with more complex tools. So like even for the biggest companies in the world, just get the Excel part right and just organically see like what you can't do with Excel, which with Power Query and the data model and everything else, as you know, Python now, you can do a hell of a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. Totally making sense to me. So it sounds like if somebody wanted to kind of get into this career, it sounds like Excel is like probably the first step, is just like get good at Excel skills and maybe learn 3-statement modeling. Like, is that kind of the right order? Are there any other stops along the way?
Yeah, I think it's a good start. And again, some people might, come in the chat and say, hey, like I've been modeling or I've been in FP&A for 20 years and I've never built a 3-statement model, which I totally get. But yeah, I would still say you've got to be good at Excel, and we can probably dig a little bit more into what that means now as well. And yeah, fundamentals of 3-statement modeling. I think I've seen in the chat once or twice, like business acumen come up, which is spot on. And even like, commercial, I don't know how to call this, but like being able to make good judgment calls around the model, understanding like the importance of materiality in what you're doing. Like, do you have to just model everything to the nth degree? The answer is obviously no, but it's like, okay, well, how do you choose where you build the complexity in your model? Because there's always a balance between like complexity and accuracy, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how do you think about that problem? Like, do you focus on kind of the main levers that can be pulled for the business? Do you focus on things that are bigger, and ignore the smaller stuff? Is that the general right framework for that? Or are there other ways you think about it?
It's probably not far off. I think back to my consulting days. It's not like as a consultant, every project was the same. So you'd probably be looking project by project. Quite often when I consulted, it would start with me and an MD or a founder sat in a room for a day or two going, right, me saying like, okay, what do you need? Tell me about the business. What are you trying to get to? So from those conversations, you start to understand, okay, they're interested in like how much money they might need to raise to fund this. They want to expand into North America and do this marketing campaign. What does that look like? What could the returns be? So it just depends. But I would normally say, you probably want, I don't know, 5, maybe a few more major KPIs. Some people do a lot more. And then you just have to think about how are you flexing those? So in a financial model, you might do scenario modeling just with like best case, most likely worst. But actually, I think the best scenario modeling is when it's really strategic. You can still have those 3 to give you a bit of a kind of range. But then it's like, okay, well, scenario 7 is we're going to go into the US market. We're going to do this marketing campaign. We need to invest in this group of people to join the team there. We need to spend this money here. What does that cost? When are we going to pay that back? Versus scenario 8, which is we don't go into the US market. We double down on like pay-per-click spend in the UK and Australia, and you do all these different things. So that for me is like really interesting and good scenario modeling.
That sounds super fun. I'm curious. We're like I said, we're going to go off the rails and just get down to these rabbit holes. So in something like that, say we're going to go into a new country. We're going to hire a bunch of people. And so like pretty easy and obvious to model the cost. But how about like the payback? You don't know necessarily, is it going to work? How do you sort of handle that, that uncertainty? Do you like give ranges in the models? Is that sort of how you guys would handle that?
Yeah, it depends. And again, it very much depends on like what type of modeling you're doing. When I was working with smaller business, sometimes not small businesses, still multi-million-dollar, revenue businesses, it might be quite high level. It's just like, we think like the kind of target, the total addressable market is X. we might be able to get X percentage of that, which equates to this much, this many sales a month or a year. But so you've got a difference between sort of top down modeling and bottom up modeling in various industries. It's really hard. Yeah, because they're all guesses. And this is the thing with financial modeling. You're forecasting the future. What you build is an abstract representation of what you think is going to happen in real life with the numbers.
Yep.
But it's all guessing, and it's always going to be wrong.
Yep.
I'd probably just highlight the difference between deterministic and stochastic modeling, where when you do what they call deterministic modeling, you are making a prediction with a set of assumptions. You can actually set up your Excel model in various ways with VBA or data tables, where you can get lots of different outputs for lots of scenarios at the same time. But in theory, you're doing kind of single point forecasting. And then there's a whole other area of modeling. And I don't know whether you guys go into this at Maven much, but the kind of stochastic modeling with Monte Carlo analysis, where you're actually dealing with probabilities. So, you have to pick your distribution curves.
Yep.
Is it a normal distribution curve? Is it skewed one way or the other? Are there correlations between your uncertain variables? And it's just a huge field of additional modeling that's I find really interesting anyway.
Yeah, you're making me, all these thoughts that are going through my head are just like how simple the financials that we use at Maven are, and how they could probably be a lot better forecasting.
They could, but it might not add any more value. Sometimes the simple stuff, and you'll find this with people that run their own businesses or CFOs. Half the time they know the answer in the back of their head anyway. They'd be able to get a pen and paper out and jot down what the answers from your really complicated financial model are. So lots of modelers are very guilty of overcomplicating things and maybe getting a little bit too excited by how clever they've been. I did that as well, by the way, when I was younger.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah,
Jonathan, I agree. This guy is clear and honest. Thank you for that.
Exactly. I love that comment. I was just going to say the same thing. That's awesome. So let's get into, you said Excel, being really good at Excel is kind of one of the bars. And then let's talk a little bit about what that means. How does somebody know if they're kind of good enough at Excel to do this type of work?
I think it's harder now than it's ever been before. And I'm going to be in Las Vegas in a month with one of your colleagues, Enrique, at the Excel World Championship Finals. For anyone that doesn't know, in the chat, I will shout out that there is an Excel Esports World Championship. It culminates in finals in Vegas every year. And it's spectacular. And the reason why I mention that is I think I'm good at Excel. And then you see what these pro players do in Excel for an esports competition, and it will just blow your mind. So for financial modeling, you can actually do a huge amount with very simple stuff. You don't even have to use that many really complex formulas. You can keep it all nice and simple. But in the broader terms of what's going on with Microsoft and Excel at the moment, I think you've got to be up to speed with dynamic arrays to a certain extent. If you're going to go down the dynamic array route, you probably have to master let and lambda and the helper functions like scan, reduce, and map. And suddenly you find yourself, without expecting it, in a world where you feel like a coder. And this is what happened to me earlier this year. You go, oh my God, I'm building 10-line let functions. And then you look at VBA and M code and DAX, and you go, oh, hang on, I recognize that. That's a let. I've done that in the grid. So I don't know. I think there's a foundational level of skill you've got to have as a financial modeler. And then if you really want to call yourself an expert in Excel today, it's probably an endless task. You'll never be an expert. There's always something else to learn.
Oh, it's constantly changing. I mean, thank you, Microsoft, for always making it better, right? But it's
totally.
So folks, after hearing this, are you guys thinking this sounds more interesting as a potential career path? Is anybody kind of getting enticed to try to want to learn more? Just curious how this is resonating with folks. Awesome. Yeah, Oscar's finding it like it could be something up his alley.
And that's why I mentioned that. I wasn't being deliberately pedantic at the start. I really think there is a difference between what you might think of as a career in financial modeling, which I don't even think has been a thing for that long in the grand scheme of things. I'm not sure 10, 15 years ago, there would have been many routes where you're like, okay, I'm going to be a career financial modeler. Like if you think of investment banking world, the financial modeling and like the slide decks, I mean, I've never been an investment banker, but from my understanding, talking to people in the industry, that's the stuff you do as a junior analyst that you try and get away from as quickly as possible. So you have to be a really rare breed to be like, oh, I love this. And actually, do you know what? I don't want to do anything else with my career. I just want to build spreadsheets.
Yeah. Yep.
That's me.
Yeah. Yeah. And at one point it was like finance, accountant, like, and then it's somehow gotten a lot deeper. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
I could see another life where maybe I ended up going down that path and would probably enjoy the work. It sounds pretty cool.
It's definitely cool, but again, you touched on something really interesting earlier where you're saying you don't think necessarily, I think you were saying like data analysts don't really need to step into the finance space. And I think I totally agree with you. And I talked about this in South Africa recently with some of the kind of Excel nerds out in Johannesburg, which was awesome. And I was saying, like, if you've got those two camps, I think today a financial modeler has to step into a data analyst's mindset.
You kind of need to, yeah.
We have to, because the whole Excel environment is now more attuned to being like a database and an ETL tool and everything else.
Yeah.
But for data analysts, I mean, unless you really want to learn what financial modelers are doing, I don't feel like there's any pressure on a data analyst to be like, oh God, without that, I'm actually at risk of, losing lots of opportunities in the future.
Yeah, I don't think so. Certainly not going like really deep, probably not even needing to like totally have your head around the three statement accounting. Yeah. But one thing I love to see analysts that at least can get like unit economics for things, right? That can understand, I sell something for this, there's this percentage margin on it, I have this marketing cost. So I think that type of sort of like super high level business knowledge is important, and understanding of just like how the unit economics work on stuff. But yeah, statements, like we almost would never get into that just as a regular data analyst, business intelligence analyst.
And like, there's some really good comments, partly from Carolina, who's doing a great job, like fending questions in here as well. Like, and Carolina's just said that there's a difference between modeling for banking and modeling for strategy. And that was kind of my point earlier. Like, it does depend what company, industry you're in. Because if you're in like any part of an investment bank, you might be doing like equity research or looking at M&A transactions, which is a very particular thing. If you're on a project finance modeling team where you're looking at like a multi-billion-dollar wind farm infrastructure project where like typically there's no historic data. It's like you're going to build this really expensive thing that's got to be paid back from the cash generated from the thing. Like, that is a totally different world of modeling with debt sculpturing and all of these funny acronyms that people are familiar with, versus you're in a finance function and you're in the accounting team. You get the month-end numbers. You need to produce a variance report every month, update us, work with the C-suite team to say, okay, here's where we are now. How do our different strategic forecasts look? Do we want to change them? So that, it's totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's so good to get a kind of a window into this world. Had a couple of folks in the chat mentioning MVP, and have you seen his video?
Really?
I'm not sure what they're talking about.
I'm
Giles.
so humble. I don't want to make a big fuss about it,
Oh, is the coat hung on your chair?
No. As if I would be ready at the drop of a hat to be in MVP mode. I don't know what you're talking about, guys. Get the video ready to play, haven't you?
So
always there.
That's awesome. Sure, a lot of you guys in the chat have seen Giles's video. As we were getting started here, before you guys jumped on, I told him, I was like, it felt like Justin Timberlake in the Lonely Island, in that it was such high production value and also pretty hilarious. So I got a great kick out of it. I've watched it a bunch of times. Awesome stuff. And I'll give you guys a link to this, to that video too, so you guys can catch it afterwards. But yeah, Giles, tell us about that. Like, obviously very cool that you won the award. What was the inspiration to make that video? And like, what was that process making this like high production video? It's clearly it was like a decent lift to do it too.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, the original kind of cheesy inspiration for it was Miles, my business partner, and I a couple of years ago sat down and said, look, we're not getting any younger. We're both in our 40s. Well, I'm just 40. He's late 40s, but, you know, we're in our 40s. And we said, what do we want to do? Like, how do we run full stack where if we look back in a year or two, we're going to be really happy? And the consensus we came to is we don't want to put pressure on ourselves and take on a bunch of funding and target like hockey stick growth curves and hate running the business. We want to enjoy it now. So we kind of set out with a mindset of let's find any opportunity to do something that we really enjoy. So I do lots of things with my YouTube, which is called Excel on the Road. You're welcome to follow it, where I will travel abroad and I will talk to people in the Excel and financial modeling world, and I'll do some Excel-y stuff. And then the other thing was the MVP video. So it genuinely was a semi-tipsy conversation with my brother-in-law a couple of years ago and last year, where I was like, oh God, I'd love to do something. Because my family, including him, are so musical. Every Christmas, you know, I'll be at my sister's for part of it, and it'll end up with him on the piano and everybody singing. And I was like, oh, I need to do something that brings these worlds together. And the silly thing with the video was I got the nomination from Mark Proctor, who is probably regretting it now because he doesn't know what kind of worms he's opened up. But I hadn't been awarded it. So we had to commit to like this day of shooting with a professional team, professional dancers who just got told, we need you for a music video. So they probably thought they were rocking up to like Justin Timberlake. And when they turned up, you could just see them all going, what's an MVP? What is that? But it was just the coolest day, and yeah, bunch of pros, lots of favors called in for my brother-in-law and my sister, and we had no idea what it was going to be at the end. So yeah,
so
love
cool.
it. I'm glad it was received well. It was a little bit cheeky and rude, but you know, we just wanted to have a bit of fun. That was it.
No, it was great. How many people were like in the video? There's a ton of people in that video, right? Like,
yeah,
dozens?
probably a good 20, 25.
Yeah.
I mean, so just the people in the video, you've got 3 backing singers, I think about 6 or 7 in the band. Adam, 12, I think it was 11 or 12 dancers. But then you've got, you know, a whole backing crew of professional lighting people, sound engineers. The space that we had, again, was all organized through Adam. So, I don't know, 30 people maybe involved, which was just bonkers. So it did exactly what we wanted. It was well received. It was a bit of fun. And thank you, Microsoft. I do take the award very seriously.
I love it. Yeah, and congratulations. It's it is a big deal. So you do deserve it. Congratulations. And yeah, oh my gosh, the video was in such good spirit. And like I love how you say, you know, we look for any opportunity to have fun while we're running this business. And I think we have a lot of fun at Maven Analytics, but I think you put the bar up a lot higher for us now on that one. So,
and that would be like, for me, I'd love to see more. This sounds a bit preachy, and I don't mean it that way, but like good. Like I hope people try and do a similar thing and just like make funny stuff, because I am, as you may know, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm fed up of the generic churn algorithm rubbish on LinkedIn, and I just I just love it when people do stuff that's like interesting and different and funny. And yeah, that was the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also going to drop your LinkedIn link in the chat. I put the Excel on the Road chat link in there. So I've tried to keep up with all of these awesome places that you're talking about that folks should follow you.
Nice.
And then actually one more, Giles. I want folks who might be interested in going like deeper in financial modeling. I'd love to give them a link to Full Stack Modeler. Folks, This is Giles's business. Giles, could you talk a little bit about what Full Stack Modeler does? Like when somebody signs up, what's that experience like for them? What do they get?
Yeah, I mean, just have a look at the website in part if you're really interested in the detail. But we train people in Excel and financial modeling. It's a membership community, lots of live events. I won't make it a massive sales pitch. Just go and have a look. We've got a free Excel Foundations course you can sign up to from our website. So you can get a feel for the platform and what we do. But yeah, we've been doing it for about 5 years, and I love it. Like, I genuinely just like talking to people about Excel, which is again, just a sign of our geekiness, all of us, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I've actually had the pleasure of getting a couple of students that came through Full Stack Modeler become Maven students. Yeah. So I've got to hear them sing your praises before. So definitely that's my endorsement. At least check it out if you guys are interested. And yeah, with that, we could jump into the Q&A if folks are ready to put Giles on the hot seat. I think we should do it.
Okay, I'm ready.
Awesome. So let's see. All right. So this one's from Shefalika. What are the skills, especially the tech stack and qualifications required to become a financial modeler? So you went deep into Excel already. What other things?
I mean, there's a range of things. I mean, again, we talked about Excel. So I think the fundamental tool is Excel. But even now within Excel, I would say a lot of roles that lean into financial modeling, like a really good fundamental understanding of Power Query wouldn't hurt, because the moment you're dealing with any data or repetitive processes, you've got to know Power Query. And that we still to this day are amazed by how many companies we work with that bearing in mind Power Query's been around for 13 years, maybe more, as an add-in, I think, originally, or an extra download, but nobody uses it, and it's just mind-blowing how powerful it is. So I think there's a whole layer of what you can do within Excel as part of a tech stack. And then if you want to know my broad tech stack, so some of which I need to actually kind of double down on and get back up to speed with, but I use Oak, which is a tool from Operis, Oak Analysis Kit, which is a model review tool. Because if you're doing any modeling, you have to review your models like quite systematically, and ideally not you reviewing your own models. You want somebody else to do it. So I use Oak. Our Excel I need to install, but it's fantastic for kind of navigating around precedence and dependence. And then there's a couple of tools. OA Robot is the new hot tool on the market. It's in beta testing at the moment. All of the Excel Battle Pros are starting to use OA Robot. So it automates lots of micro actions. And Monkey Tools is another very powerful one from Ken Pulse, who's a very well-known and highly respected MVP. That's all about kind of Power Query and crazy levels of automation and stuff like that. So beyond that, you have a look at tools like Vision and Bricks, and there's various other tools on the market that can sometimes do similar things to Excel. Hopefully that answers a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, you gave me a bunch of tools that I haven't used personally, so I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience have that list as well too, to kind of give them a bearing. And curious, Murillo asks, what do you think about Solver in Excel? Do you use Solver a lot as a financial modeler?
No, I don't, to be honest. And again, it's one of those things when you speak to different groups of people, and I include myself in this, there's some things that other people use as like a staple part of their approach that I or others just I never use it. You find this even with little things like styles in Excel. Like some people will be religiously styles, and other people will never use them and probably don't know where the styles list is. So sorry, I can't help much with that, to be honest.
Awesome. No, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see what we've got here. This one's from Nishith. Generally, what sort of KPIs do financial modelers keep in mind while they're performing data modeling?
It totally depends, because it depends who your key stakeholders are. So there's so many kind of ratios and specific financial KPIs, but you might be looking at things like break even, or just like NPV, or the IRR of a project if you're working in a certain area. When you get into the world of like debt serious debt facility modeling, and if the management of debt covenants, where as part of the terms it's like, okay, well, you're getting this money, but your income or your earnings have to be at a certain level. You might be looking at things like, how many times can you cover your interest payments through the money that you earn. So it really depends, but probably broadly, I would, in most financial models, a mix of like profitability KPIs, some sort of cash-based KPIs, and returns KPIs for investors, I would have thought.
Yep. Yeah. Lots of revenues and costs. Revenues coming in, costs going out, investments, returns that you're making. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, a couple of things. I heard you say NPV, so net present value, for folks that aren't sure, that an IRR, internal rate of return. So just in case folks are scratching your heads, if you're a data analyst, a lowly data analyst like me, and not as familiar, those are good ones to know. This one's from Frederick. If somebody wanted to get started as a consultant doing financial modeling, is that a viable path? Would you have any advice for somebody who wanted to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a viable path. I started, when I quit my job, and I remember I was doing a contract role that was actually nothing to do with financial modeling for the first one. It was like GDPR project management. I don't know how I blagged that for 9 months, but found myself being a GDPR manager in a company.
That would sound like my nightmare.
Yeah, it was an experience. But around that, and evenings and weekends, I was on what was the predecessor to Upwork. So I just put myself out there. And I'll be honest, it was quite a stressful experience, because that was kind of where I got to grips with, all right, I'm now dealing with my own clients, and they have expectations, and you've got to deal with the commercial side of things. And actually, the biggest thing that is just to be aware of, like when you jump from a role as an analyst or a modeler with a company, I went from the comfort of being in a team of modelers. And the first company I worked for was such a good team of pros who were really well trained.
Yeah.
And as soon as I joined the team, I got all the same training, and I had this network of like, oh, I'm struggling with this thing. Let me just go and ask Kate, who's like the pro in the team, and you get all this advice. And then when you go on your own, I even referenced like the story of me being in a room with a founder for a day who's found us on a website, made an inquiry. I have to then go and meet them for a day, and you're just there and you represent yourself. Like, you suddenly are the face of the business, and you've got to do everything from like figure out what they want, agree the commercials, do all the admin in the back end of the company with POs and invoicing, scope the thing, plan the build the model, get the review done, make sure they're happy, deal with the changes. There's always changes, like without question. There's always changes, which is the worst thing. So it's a hard transition, but for me, I could never go back. Like that transition from employee to
now you love it.
Was incredible. Yeah,
it's so funny. It sounds very similar to how I think about it, becoming a data analyst. And so when Chris Dutton and I started, we started at the same company around the same time, and it was a big company that had a large strategy and analytics group. That's what we were a part of. And same thing, like how you're talking about, when you're with the company, you've got these 4 other financial modelers that sit next to you, and they're really good. And guess what? You're going to get stuck 10 times a day, not know how to do something, and you can just grab the guy who's a little more seasoned. And that's how it was for us when we were getting started. So for me, I'm so glad I didn't just try to forge into a consultant role personally. I feel like I would have been stuck. But then later on, after getting the skills from a large company and getting the training and working with awesome people, same thing. I love smaller, like more entrepreneurial places, and it can be really, really fun once you have those skills. But I don't know, that's my advice. And not to discourage anybody. Like, I think if you're an amazing self-starter and you can pick up these skills and you're okay troubleshooting everything completely on your own, it might be the best way for you to get into. But just, I really benefited from having a big company. So if you're deciding between those two options and you have an offer, there's some benefits to the other way too, especially early on.
And I like, I always remember there was a stage after I did contracting for like 2 or 3 years. So built up a nice nest egg of money from contracting, because for anyone that doesn't know, it's a bit less so now with tax changes, but you can earn way more as a day rate contractor doing the same work that you would do if you're an employee. And that was like a light bulb moment when I spotted this. But I remember when I then was like, okay, I'm going to be a consultant. And I set up a website, I've talked about this in an article on LinkedIn. It's like gaining momentum analytics. This looks so cool, paid for a logo. And then I was just like, I'm going to be rich. And nobody came to the website. You just sat there, you're like, what do I do? I don't understand. Why doesn't everybody else see how amazing I am? And that was it. So then I had to kind of evolve from that and go, okay, I maybe have to go and network and do some other stuff. It's not going to be that easy. So I think it's a hard, but the most rewarding path for me anyway, to try and find a way where I am doing my own thing and kind of in charge of my own destiny a little bit.
Yeah, it's awesome. Giles, here's a question from David. So it says, Giles has a course on Maven. So yes, guys, if you have a Maven subscription, there's an introduction to financial modeling with Giles. He does teach on our platform. What's the difference between that course and what you do at Full Stack Modeler?
Yeah, so the Intro to Financial Modeling course is one course with you guys, and it's I mean, Chris and I spent a lot of time on the scope of that course, because it really is like an intro, assuming you don't know anything almost. Like, it's for data people, which if you're looking at this and you've got 10 to 20 years of modeling experience, don't go and do the Intro to Modeling course, because you'll find it immensely frustrating. But for data people who really want the foundations, that course is like, what is a three-statement model? What does a model look like, just from a bird's eye view? I do get you doing some practical modeling work, but just segments of what you would do in a big modeling project. And then Full Stack is just way broader. So we kind of have one accreditation journey where it's like foundations of Excel, more advanced Excel, foundations of financial modeling, advanced financial modeling, a bit of data analytics, but it's kind of still within the realms of predominantly Excel, and some presentation skills. So yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll drop a link in the chat real quick to that course. So what I'd say is, like, if you've already got a Maven subscription, check out Giles there, because you're already paying for it. And that's a good way to kind of sample, do you like learning from Giles? Do you like this type of work? And then from there, that might be a good sort of teaser to think if going all the way with full stack would make sense. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Giles. So we were talking a little bit about how nice it is to have these expert colleagues when we were getting started. A couple people in the chat said, well, like, you don't need that now. You can have you can ask ChatGPT when you get stuck, things like that. How good do you think of a tool ChatGPT is, like, for helping you with financial modeling type stuff? Is it useful? Does it get confused? Is it perfect? Like, where is it?
I mean, ChatGPT isn't going to build a model for you yet. I mean, it could give you an answer, but it's not going to build a model quite the way that you might want to as a modeler. There are tools out there. So the big two, Medano and OpenBox, are these two modular design tools that really do potentially allow you to shortcut the build process. But, it comes with a cost, and it's another user interface to learn. So, they're worth a look, but they're different. I am trying to upskill myself for Vegas, because I've been a massive hypocrite for at least a year, because I have been telling everyone else that they have to compete in the Excel battles that take place throughout the year, because it's great training and you just got to find the time. And then I've not been doing it myself. So I have been a massive hypocrite. And I've now said, right, I'm going to compete in Vegas. There's like a last chance qualifier round. So I'm trying to upskill myself with all the lambdas, because all the top pros have got like a database of lambdas where you can just perform regular challenge things quickly. And ChatGPT has been amazing, because I will have a go at the lambda, and quite often then I hit a point, I'm like, oh, it's not working. You throw code like that into the right version of ChatGPT, and it just gives you the code back. Like, it's genius. So I think for potentially troubleshooting and being like a partner for coding solutions or reviewing your code is fantastic. broader, like build me a 3-statement model that has X, Y, Z. I don't think it's quite there yet.
Yeah, and maybe you can ask it pointed questions, but yeah, it's So it's such a good take, and I'd say that's a pretty good parallel with same thing with data analysis type work. It can help with certain stuff. It can help provide some code for Python or SQL. You probably need to know enough to check its work, make sure it's doing. Does the code run? Is the code, if it runs, is it doing what you want it to do? That type of thing. But it can be helpful. I don't know. It can be hit or miss though at this point.
And it can get it wrong. And there are times when I've used it where it's just wrong. And then you go, hang on a minute, that's wrong. And it goes, oh yeah, sorry about that.
And it's very confident when it's wrong too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a really intelligent, fresh graduate. And I don't mean that as derogatory as that probably sounds in part, but it's like amazingly confident, very intelligent, doesn't have the real world experience yet. So you've got to really be like, is that right? Oh no, it's wrong. Sorry about that. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny you say talking about college graduates, because Mohammed has a related question. Basically, somebody wants to get into finance but doesn't have that background. If they've got no experience, which courses should they consider, or like what things should they focus on right away as a beginner? I know you covered some of this already, but
yeah, it depends what you mean by finance broadly. So, I mean, just from the modeling side, obviously that you've got technical modeling skills, but if you're talking about broader finance, there might be accounting degrees you have to look at realistically. There might be other things. So you have to kind of figure out where you want to go in finance. If you want the technical skills, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but just at the very least sign up for our free course for Excel Foundations. But I would highly recommend to anybody to just start navigating around LinkedIn a little bit, navigate around YouTube a little bit. I do lots of travel Excel stuff, so I will share bits that are technically interesting, but there are others out there, lots of MVPs with great channels that you just have to figure out who you like. The main guy in our industry that's not for beginners is Dim Early, who's like one of the top competitors. So I, for example, follow all of his videos because that's where I learn. So you will naturally end up with a collection of YouTube accounts that you like to learn from. And then I would actually look at the MECC and the FMWC. So the Financial Modeling World Cup is worth following on YouTube and LinkedIn and on their URL anyway, because you can keep up with the two competitions. And then there's a collegiate version of that competition. So if anybody wants to start getting hands-on with Excel competition stuff, that's just a little bit easier than the big pro stuff, the MECC, the Microsoft Excel Collegiate Challenge, is an organization where I believe it's free to enter. So you can take part, you can download some of the challenges, and that's a great way to start getting your hands dirty.
Awesome. Oh, I love it. It's wild how much great content is out there these days. And it's the same if you want to be a data analyst or data scientist. Like when I was trying to be a data analyst, none of that was there, YouTube existed, but it was so much less content. There wasn't all of this really strong stuff. So it's fantastic that you're pointing people towards things that it's on YouTube. It's 100% free to follow these people on LinkedIn. There's a lot of good content too from the same people. So I think really, really good advice. This is a great question from Rosemary, Giles. So if you were interviewing to hire a potential new financial modeler, and you had multiple applicants, what are the qualities or skills that you think would put somebody to the top of your list?
That's a really good question. So part of the answer is I wouldn't leave it down to my gut instinct. I would be testing them. So if we were hiring a modeler, you would have to pass some pretty thorough tests to prove that you've got the skills that you say you do. I think there's an area. So when we start with cohorts from companies, it's really interesting because you tend to get, I'm going to talk about this in Vegas, so I'm preempting Vegas a bit, but you'll get some people in a cohort that think they're experts, and they can be the hardest people to train and manage because they don't think they need training. And we've had people on our like submission forms for the cohorts when we assess them say, I don't need this. And then you look at their work and you're like, you really do. Like, and it's not me being critical. It's like, they just don't know what they don't know. Yeah. So there's then a group of people in a cohort who are probably like higher end intermediate, but they're really humble and they're like, I know that I'm behind. I feel like I'm way behind. When you meet people that have that mindset where they're like, oh my God, I just always feel like I'm behind. And a lot of the MVPs are like this. Like most MVPs you meet will be like, oh my God, there's so much. I'm seeing this person post this on LinkedIn. How do I keep up? So it doesn't stop at any point in your career. You think like all Microsoft MVPs would just be sat there going like, oh, I've made it. This is the pinnacle. They're like, no, suddenly you're like, oh God, I've got to keep up with all the other MVPs. So that was a rambling answer to some level of humility and like awareness of the bigger picture and what you don't know, alongside really good technical skills.
So you're saying you like that person that's pretty good skills, but a little bit humble and undervalues their skills. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the key. Undervalues their skills because quite often they will be more skilled than the people that badge themselves as an expert. And it's because they have that humility and that kind of outlook of like, oh my God, there's so much going on and I need to try and keep up.
Yeah. Plus that ego is a little easier to work with and or the lack of an ego and a little easier and more pleasant to work with than some of the other folks too sometimes.
Yeah, but also, and that's why I say like I'm not kind of really being derogatory about that group of experts. Sometimes you get one or two people that are really difficult for whatever reason, but actually quite often when you get through to an expert that doesn't think they need training and then they have the light bulb moment of like, oh, okay, I have taken my eye off the ball for 2 years and the world has changed. It's like they can be the best people to then progress through training because they just get it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Here's another specific one, and we won't do too many more because we're getting close to time, but this is from Estefania. In your opinion, is Excel sufficient for analyzing large volumes of data, or do you need more advanced tools like R or Python for scalability? Like, can you get away with mostly Excel or just Excel, or do you really kind of need some of those other tools?
Probably depends what analysis you're doing. So I am by no means like a coding expert. So, me trying to get under the hood of Python in Excel, it's a stressful experience and I'm having to be dragged kicking and screaming. I mean, if for most finance processes that you might see in a normal FP&A team, I think Excel can do a very good job with Power Query and the data model. I always struggle a little bit with the data model where I think, well, okay, if I'm getting into relational modeling genuinely, why wouldn't I then be using Fabric or Power BI or getting into that kind of
some
different
other
world
database tool?
The data model is something I understand, but I certainly never as a consultant used it. But Power Query, I think could do a huge amount of the heavy lifting for normal finance ETL roles. I'm always really intrigued with SQL because, again, I'm not a SQL expert, but I've been trying to get my understanding better of like, is there a layer of SQL knowledge that every finance person should have so that they don't end up doing things in Power Query that they shouldn't be doing in Power Query? Like, is there that nice layer of Power Query data management that you should always do from a database with SQL?
Yeah, smart. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Power Query definitely is. I think Power Query is a database tool, in my opinion. Like you're doing things with relational models. It's very similar work to using SQL or using Power BI as a database tool. Kind of a similar path for me is like the first 5 years of my career, I was just using Excel as a data analyst and getting a lot of mileage out of it. And then I got to some situations where I couldn't solve the problems in Excel anymore. And that's when I needed to learn SQL. And I probably could have used Power Query. The only reason I didn't is I did not know Power Query existed at the time, and I didn't even know it was an option. And I saw these database engineers use it, or they were called DBAs at the time, but now we'd probably call them database engineers that were using the SQL database. And so I went in that direction. But I really think for a lot of the stuff, Power Query like really moves you towards that direction of being able to handle a database. So that's, I think, really good advice.
Somebody's posted Layla's channel. Layla's another one I follow. Layla's like the goat. Layla's like the goat in our industry.
Yeah, she does super, super high quality videos on YouTube. She has, I don't know if actually her course is still on Maven. She had a course on Maven for a while in VBA, but it might, I don't know if it's there anymore.
So I was in Vienna earlier this year, and so I met Layla at the Global Excel Summit in February, and I was like, I'll be in your hometown. Can we meet for lunch? Somehow convinced her to kind of come and meet me, and she was just the loveliest person, and like I was saying with MVPs, just really humble, and a load of stuff that she's working on and constantly like working hard to improve herself. And yeah, Layla's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, she's great. Let's see. We've got probably time for one more. I want to make sure I pick a good one here for you. Let's see. This is probably pretty specific, but this is from Dawn here. So Dawn, I think the context being when you're working on a model, how would you think about like the risk analysis, evaluation of the model, and assessing if it's a good model or not? Probably maybe didn't.
Do you mean in like terms of the model itself, or so it's because there's a whole area of like how do you assess whether a model is good? I don't know whether the question is more about like in modeling, how do you deal with risk and evaluating risk on a project? I don't know whether who asked the question.
Dawn. This is from Dawn. I'm not sure.
Dawn, I don't know if you've got time to put in the chat. I can try and answer both if you want, quickly. So I mean, my experience of like risk modeling a lot, I used to work on bids. So there were two layers of risk analysis that we did. So one was actually using Monte Carlo. We used to use a tool called At Risk, where you try and pick your key variables that might have an impact on whatever the key outputs are. So you would end up with a range of outputs. And what At Risk did beautifully, but very riskily, was produce this quick report. I always remember it. It's called Quick Report. Hit the button, 10 seconds later, and you had this amazing report, one pager that popped up in Excel with all like the confidence levels. So like P90, 80, 70.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So like if you tell it that your KPI is NPV and you've got your variable, your distribution curve set up, you just get this amazing looking report that says, we are 90% confident that if you go in at this price, you will cover your cost base. So it's like, so you present those numbers, and actually what's really important with that kind of modeling is like, are the assumptions right? Have you put the right distribution curves? Yeah. Have you got the correlations right between all the things that are moving? So that's one area of risk analysis. Quite often on things like bids, you'll have a risk register. So we used to have like, what did we call it? There was like an opportunities and risks register where it was kind of like event risk. So not just we think we might need 10 people or 15 people to deliver this project. This was like something good or bad might happen, and this is the probability of it happening. And you can kind of do like a bit of an expected value calculation where you take the potential cost or impact times the probability to get an overall EV. So that's one way you could do it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, a very technical one to end on. Giles.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's great. It's great. Thank you so much for joining us. It really is always a pleasure catching up with you, and I feel like you've given the audience a lot of good stuff. See y'all next time.
See you later. Thanks, everyone.